In this video, we're going to be discussing the power management module that Tiffin Motorhomes uses on the Phaeton, Bus, and Red models, as well as the 2016 Breeze. This will all apply to 2016 models. The power management module is located in the front electrical compartment. There are times where it's mounted on the back wall of this electrical compartment, but you can see that it has a number of battery cables going to it that make it easy to identify. The power management module has a number of different functions that it fills. First of all, it does the battery disconnect for your house battery disconnect. So this would disconnect everything in the inside of the motorhome. The power management module does not, the battery disconnect on it does not power down the G6 chassis panel. It just powers up primarily the house loads that are inside the motorhome. So that's the first function that it does. The second function is that it does the battery merge between the house and chassis batteries, and so we're going to be talking about that in a lot more detail here shortly. As well, it handles the condenser fan relay and breaker, is also located on this module as well. So that's the primary functions of the power management module. So I'm going to take a minute here to just go over some of the primary components that are on this power management module. I would also highly recommend going to our website and downloading the specific manual for the power management module, as it has a diagram here that very clearly outlines each of the components I'm going to talk about. So here we have the actual house battery disconnect solenoid. It's a device that can be unplugged and replaced on the later models where there's just a simple harness that unplugs. So if there was a failure on this, that can be replaced. You have your main battery cables coming in here, and these come directly from the battery bank, actually from the actual rotary switch at the battery disconnect, and so the cable comes there. And you can see here it also has a cable going to the G6 panel. So you can see here that this is from the battery bank, and then the actual G6 panel is powered right off that same stud right there. On the other side of the solenoid, you see that we have the cable that's going back to the G6 house panel in the rear of the motorhome that basically powers up all the house loads. So that is the house disconnect solenoid and the connections to it. There are also some wires here going to a 3-pin connector that actually perform the house connect and disconnect feature. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. There are also some other connections here for the actual battery merge outputs and so on. We'll talk about that in a little more detail. But I want to point out the network connection, which you see down here. This is a device that is connected to the RVC network. So we actually have a drop cable that goes from this location here on this connector all the way back to the house panel, where there's the hub that has all of your network connections tied together. You'll see here then there's also the little cable that goes off of that same port over to the G6 house panel. You'll also notice, if you can see here further down, there's a net LED right in the center of the device here, and that's just basically the net LED that you'd find on all the other Spyder components. In this segment, we're going to talk about how to do some troubleshooting if the house disconnect portion of this power management module is not working. So just to explain here, the house battery disconnect is a latching solenoid. So it takes a momentary 12-volt pulse to latch it on, and it magnetically stays latched on until you send a 12-volt signal to the off input, and that will turn off or unlatch the magnetic part of the latching relay and disconnect the house batteries. So that switching happens in here. There's a coil in here. So what we have is at the entrance to the motorhome, at the bottom of the entry keypad, a rocker switch that's basically just a momentary double throw rocker switch. You press up, it turns the battery disconnect on. You press down and it turns the battery disconnect off. So that rocker switch is connected directly to these 3 wires here. The first wire handles your common 12 volts that is the supply to the rocker switch. Then you have the battery connect and the battery disconnect. So all we're doing is taking 12 volt supply and just either sending it down this wire or this wire. So if you're having trouble with the solenoid connecting or not connecting, what you can do is actually just jumper at the unplug this connector here if you want to verify if it's a harness or switch issue or the module itself. You can actually just unplug this harness here and then just jumper the 12 volts, and again, I would strongly recommend referring to the pinout diagram that we have on our website for the power management module so that you can see how to do this. One other item to check on the house disconnect side of things, of course, is the ground wire, which is the ground that's common to all the functions on this module. So this ground wire is a 14 gauge black wire that should go directly up to the ground bus bar just above the power management module here. And so you'd want to make sure, of course, that that is grounded. You'd notice that if it wasn't grounded, that the net LED would be off, and so that would be another indicator that there's no ground there as well. One other thing I should mention is that there is on the solenoid coil a built-in PTC fuse that's a low current PTC fuse to prevent the coil of this solenoid burning out if the rocker switch were ever to be stuck in a latching on or off position, or if there was a short in a wire, it would keep the solenoid coil from failing. And so if you repeatedly operate the battery disconnect solenoid, as in maybe 10 or 12 times, you may see that PTC fuse trip, so you just stop actuating it for a brief 30 seconds or so, and that PTC fuse would actually reset. In this segment, we're going to talk about troubleshooting issues with the battery merge function of the power management module. And we're actually back here at the battery bay compartment, and it's important to note that the actual battery merge is not done at the power management module. The power management module is simply controlling this large gigavac solenoid that you see here, and that is what's actually merging the power between the two battery banks. So you can see that on this side we have the house side, and here's the cable coming from the chassis or engine batteries. So this solenoid, when it closes or is turned on, will merge the two battery banks. So there's different criteria for how this works in certain situations. If you are parked and the coach is plugged in and the house batteries are charging, the power management module monitors the house voltage, and if it sees that the house voltage is above 13.3 volts and the chassis voltage is below 12.4 volts for 30 seconds, it will then merge this solenoid and thereby allow the house batteries, or the charger that's on the house batteries, to top up or maintain the chassis battery voltage. The battery merge solenoid will stay merged for 1 hour. At that point it will disconnect and wait for 10 minutes until it lets the voltage equalize out, and then remonitors, and if the chassis voltage is still below 12.4 volts, it will then remerge for another hour. The other scenario when this merge solenoid is turned on is when you're driving down the road or parked and the engine's running and the alternator's producing power. It allows you to charge the house batteries off the chassis bank. So in that case, what you need to see is the chassis batteries above 13.3 volts and the house batteries below 12.4 volts, at which point it will merge the two battery banks and allow the house batteries to be charged off the chassis or the alternator. Again, it will stay merged for 1 hour, after which point it will disconnect the house batteries from the chassis and let them equalize out or level out, and then it'll remonitor things, and if the house is still below the 12.4 volts, it will then remerge for another hour and just continue that cycle. In that scenario, we also look at a couple of other criteria. The key, of course, has to be on, so we are looking for ignition before we allow the chassis to charge the house. We are also monitoring the generator. In case the generator starts, we would unmerge to allow the generator to then charge the house batteries through the Magnum charger as it normally would if the coach was plugged in.